seems to me it used to be, is Christianity true? Now the question is Christianity good? They think that Orthodox evangelical views are somehow immoral. I just can't help looking at it that way. I know that's probably maybe not the first tactic to take, Alisa, is it, to start talking about, well, here's why you're logically wrong. You know, what tactic do you take with somebody? I mean, you're younger, but suppose you had an older child, you know, they're adult now, and they say, hey, Mom, you are never going to see your grandchildren again because you're toxic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is such a tough question, and it's one we really poured our hearts and souls into in our advice chapter, because one of the things we do is we first of all acknowledge that every relationship dynamic is a little bit different, and how you're going to approach it is going to depend on that. Like, for example, if you have a spouse who's deconstructing, you're going to approach that a bit differently than you would if you had an adult child who has cut you off and forbidden you to see the grandkids, which, by the way, we are not exaggerating about that. Frank, night after night after night, when I go out and speak, I always meet at least one couple who tells me that. Some have even received a no contact letter. So this is something that's very, very common. We're not just kind of making this up and exaggerating. But you're going to also, you know, maybe how a parent of a teenager who's deconstructing, you're going to handle that a lot differently than you would if it's your college friend. And so we tried to walk through some of those scenarios, but let's just take that example you brought up of the elderly couple with the grown children who won't let see their grandkids. One of the things we say is it's kind of like triage, depending on the relationship, depending on the fragility of the relationship. You want to do some triage. So it's kind of like they do in hospitals when there's an accident and people start coming into the ER, and the doctors have to say, okay, which injury is the most serious? What do we need to treat first? So the guy that has the punctured lung or a gunshot, he's going to get treated before the person with a sprained wrist or something like that. And so that's the first thing we advise you to do, is do a little triage. Like, how fragile is this relationship? If it's fragile, if you've actually been told you're toxic, you can't see us anymore, do not contact me, then what we say is that it's really okay to back off, respect that boundary, and just try, if you can, try to stay in their life. And I talked with a woman just a couple weeks ago who said, you know, once in a while, I'll just text a little bit of some encouragement, like, I love you, to my, you know, my loved one who's deconstructed and doesn't want to talk to me. And sometimes they don't even respond back, but I just do it every once in a while. I pray. And if I feel like that's something I want to say, I just say, hey, I love you. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. It's really okay to do that. That's a little bit counterintuitive for Christians who we want to ask them out for coffee and fix their theology over the coffee date and point out all the errors. But we have to understand is there's a lot of wounds behind the person who's deconstructing. And like Tim mentioned in the other podcast, sometimes, you know, the perceived or real abuse, sometimes the abuse is just perceived. For example, being told that you can't live a sinful lifestyle and remain a member at a church, or being told that you're a sinner in need of a savior. These things are perceived as being abusive. In fact, I went on a comment section one time when somebody was claiming abuse, that evangelicals are abusive. And I acknowledged that there is real spiritual abuse. I know it. I've walked it. I've been through it. I believe that spiritual abuse is real. But sometimes people just say being told they're sinners or that Jesus died on the cross for their sins is abusive. And when I said that, the person came back in the comments and said, substitutionary atonement is abusive to teach that. So it requires some untangling of knots. So I would say whoever, you know, whatever relationship you have with your loved one, really seek to listen, try to identify maybe what the wounds are behind the deconstruction. And if you, like I said this just a couple days ago when I was at a Q&A about this, a woman said she had a friend who's been through a lot of abuse in church and she's very confused. And I said, look, right now, your main goal is to cry with those who cry, try to minister to your friend. Maybe she needs some good biblical counseling, and don't worry so much about the other stuff yet, but maybe just get her some help to help heal from the abuse. And then you can, you know, as you go, you can guide her toward biblical truth or something like that. But each situation is so unique and requires such a specific response. Like, for example, we tell this example in the book. If you're in college and your college friend is in deconstruction and it's wrecking your faith, it's okay for you to draw a boundary with them and say, hey, can we press the pause button on these types of discussions? Because I just need to catch my breath and catch up with some of the things you've said about Christianity and look it up for myself. And in that case, it's okay for you to be the one to draw the boundary. So it depends on the relationship. And again, do a little bit of that triage, but it is okay to back off and recognize that you might just have a fragile window of opportunity to simply stay in their life.